She did not scream this time. Screaming only made it last longer. Her father's hand came down again. Hard. Fast. Eliza Reed folded inward, arms tight around her ribs, waiting for the pain to finish speaking. The room spun. Her knees struck the floor. Somewhere in the noise, something inside her finally broke loose. Not fear. Not tears. Resolve. When his shadow moved toward her again, Eliza pushed herself up and ran, not toward safety, not toward hope, just away. And as the cabin door burst open behind her, one question burned in her chest. If I don't escape tonight, will I survive another morning? For 17 years, Eliza's life had been measured in bruises and silence. Their cabin sat high in the Blue Ridge Mountains, far from towns, far from help. A place where screams disappeared into pine and stone. A place where no one came unless they were lost or broken. Her father, Thomas Reed, had once been a decent man. People said that. Eliza barely remembered it. She only knew the man he became after her mother died. Bitter, hollow, always smelling of cheap liquor and failure. Every evening followed the same pattern. The door would open. Boots would scrape the floor. And Eliza would hold her breath, waiting to see which version of him had come home. Tonight, there had been no shouting, no warning, just cold eyes and a raised hand. That was when she knew. This was the night that would kill her. The mountains swallowed her as she ran. Snow crusted the ground, biting through the thin soles of her shoes. Branches tore at her dress. Her lungs burned, each breath sharp as broken glass. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. Behind her, her father shouted her name. The sound cracked through the trees like a gunshot. Eliza ran harder. Her legs finally gave out near a frozen creek. She stumbled, caught herself on a rock, then collapsed. The cold wrapped around her like iron. Her vision dimmed. Snowflakes blurred into spinning lights. She pressed her face into the earth. Maybe this was how it ended. At least it was quiet. When warmth returned, it felt unreal. Eliza woke slowly, confusion thick in her head. The air smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs. Beneath her was something soft, heavy, fur. She opened her eyes. The cabin was small, clean. Firelight flickered against stone walls. A kettle hissed gently nearby. Nothing here looked angry. Nothing felt dangerous. She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her side. She gasped and fell back with a sharp cry. A man turned from the fire. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair silvered by age and tied back with a strip of leather. His face was lined, weathered, but his eyes were calm. Blue. Steady, not cruel. Eliza scrambled backward, heart pounding. Her breath came fast and shallow. She searched for the door, for something to defend herself with. The man raised his hands. Slowly. "You're safe," he said. His voice was low, careful. "I won't touch you." He stayed where he was. That mattered. Eliza pressed herself against the wall, shaking. Her body waited for the next blow. It never came. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Finally, her breathing slowed. The man moved again, just enough to set a bowl on the floor between them. Steam rose from it. "Soup," he said. "You need it," quote. He stepped back. Eliza stared at the bowl, then at him, then back at the bowl. No demands, no shouting. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. The first swallow burned her throat. The second made her chest ache. By the third, tears slid down her face, silent and unstoppable. The man turned back to the fire, giving her privacy. His name was Jonah Caldwell. He did not ask her questions. He did not rush her healing. He cleaned her wounds with gentle hands and bitter-smelling salve. He spoke only when necessary. When she flinched, he stopped. Days passed in quiet rhythm. Eliza learned the sounds of his cabin. The soft crack of the fire. The scrape of his boots on stone. The wind singing through the pines outside. It was the first place she had ever rested without fear. At night, she slept wrapped in thick blankets, her body slowly remembering what peace felt like. Sometimes she woke gasping, convinced her father stood over her. Each time, Jonah was there, not touching, just sitting nearby, waiting. One evening, as the fire died low, Eliza noticed something folded near the wall. A blanket. Its pattern caught her breath. Deep green stars woven through faded gold. Her mother had owned one just like it. Long ago, before everything went wrong. She reached out and touched it. Jonah noticed. "Your mother had one like that," he said quietly. Eliza froze. "How do you know?" He hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. "Because," he said, "I knew her." The room seemed to tilt. Jonah told her then. About the woman who had once come through these mountains. About his wife, long gone. About kindness traded between strangers who trusted each other in a hard land. Eliza's chest felt too tight to breathe. Her mother had been real. She had mattered. Jonah fell silent again, as if afraid to say too much. That night, he placed two things on the table beside her bed. A bowl of stew and a small leather pouch. "Both are yours," he said. "Only one choice." Eliza knew what the pouch held. She had seen plants like that before. Her father had spoken of them once, drunk and laughing. The easy way out. Her gaze lingered on it, longer than she wanted to admit. Then she reached for the bowl. Her hands were steady. Jonah nodded once. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The mountains stood watch. And for the first time in her life, Eliza chose to live. Not because she was told to, but because she wanted to. Eliza's strength returned slowly. Not like a flame, more like embers learning how to glow again. Each morning, Jonah Caldwell left a bowl of food beside her bed. Sometimes cornmeal porridge. Sometimes stew thick with roots and dried meat. He never watched her eat, never asked if she finished. That kindness felt heavier than chains. Her body healed faster than her mind. Bruises faded from purple to yellow, cuts closed. But fear lingered in her muscles, waiting for a reason to wake. A raised voice, a sudden movement, the creak of wood at night. Jonah noticed everything. When he walked, he moved slowly. When he spoke, his voice stayed low. If he needed to pass her in the small cabin, he waited until she nodded. He treated her fear as something real, something worthy of respect, that mattered more than he knew. One afternoon, Jonah handed her a mug of warm tea and nodded toward the door. "Sun's out," he said. "Thought you might want air." Eliza hesitated. Her world had been walls for so long. Walls and corners and places to hide. The idea of open space made her chest tighten. Jonah noticed. "We don't have to go far," he said. "Just the step." She followed him outside. The mountains stretched in every direction. Pines stood tall, unmoving. Snow clung to the shaded ground, but sunlight warmed her face. The air smelled clean, honest. Eliza took a breath. Nothing bad happened. They sat on a fallen log. Jonah whittled a small piece of wood, his knife moving with practiced ease. Eliza watched the blade, watched his hands. They were scarred, strong, steady. Those hands had never hurt her. "Why me?" she asked suddenly. Jonah didn't look up. "What do you mean? Why did you bring me here?" He paused. The knife stopped moving. "I saw you fall," he said after a moment. "Didn't plan to, just happened." "That's not an answer." He glanced at her then. Really looked at her, because leaving you there would have haunted me. Eliza swallowed. No one had ever said something like that before. That night she slept without dreaming. As the days passed, Jonah began teaching her small things. Not lessons, just life. How to warm stones near the fire so the cold wouldn't settle in her bones. How to identify which roots could heal and which could kill. How to listen to the woods instead of fighting them. Eliza learned quickly. Survival had taught her how to pay attention. She noticed patterns Jonah missed. A bird that always circled before snow. The way the wind shifted before a storm. She didn't speak much, but Jonah watched her closely. One morning, he handed her a basket. "Come with me." They walked uphill, deeper into the trees. Liza's legs burned, but she didn't complain. When Jonah stopped near a cluster of pale berries, she froze. She recognized them. "Poison," she said quietly. Jonah smiled, just a little. "Good eye." Something warm sparked in her chest. Later that week, the spring near the cabin slowed to a trickle. Jonah frowned, concern lining his face. He gathered rope, preparing to climb higher into the ridge. Eliza watched the water, its color, the smell. Something felt wrong. She followed the stream until she saw it. Rust-colored earth where a small landslide had torn open the hillside. Rainwater seeped through it, tainting everything below. She ran back to Jonah, breathless, used sticks and dirt to explain. He listened. Then he nodded. They worked together for 3 days, redirecting water, packing clay, reinforcing the channel. Jonah's hands shook with effort, but he didn't stop. Neither did she. When they finished, Jonah rested his hand on her shoulder. "Couldn't have done it without you," he said. The words settled deep inside her. She mattered here. The first sign of trouble came 2 days later. Boot prints. Liza saw them before Jonah did. Deep, heavy, too fresh. Her stomach dropped. A dark glass bottle lay half buried near the fire pit. Whiskey. Cheap. The past rushed back, cold and sharp. Jonah's jaw tightened. Someone's been here. Quote, before either could speak again, voices echoed through the trees. 2 men rode into the clearing, laughing loudly. Their horses snorted, breaking the peace like glass. Landmen. Surveyors. The kind that believed anything unclaimed was theirs by right. They dismounted, eyes roaming the cabin, the land. "This place ain't marked," one said. "Means it's free." Jonah stepped forward, calm, solid. "This land's occupied." One man shoved him, hard. Eliza's breath caught. Her body screamed at her to hide, to disappear, but she didn't. She watched, listened. The men talked, bragged. One mentioned buying an old map from a dead trapper's belongings, mocked him, called him a drunk fool who died angry and alone. Then he said the name. Thomas Reed. Eliza felt the world tilt. Her father. Even dead, he was reaching for her. Something inside her hardened. She slipped away while the men laughed, moved quietly, purposefully. Her hands found the pale berries she had warned Jonah about. She crushed them into a pot of stew. Let the poison dissolve. Then she changed herself. Shoulders slumped, eyes lowered. Voice small. She offered the stew. The men took it, sneering. Minutes later, their laughter turned to groans. Pain doubled them over. Panic replaced arrogance. They fled. The clearing fell silent again. Jonah stared at Eliza. His face held no anger, only sorrow. "What kind of world," he asked softly, "teaches a child to do that?" Eliza trembled. Then she spoke. Not everything, just enough. Jonah listened, all the way through. When she finished, he went inside and returned with a small carved bird. Blue. Faded. "I made this," he said, voice thick, "for your mother." Eliza's knees nearly gave out. Her rescue hadn't been chance. It had been a circle, finally closing. But before she could speak, a new sound reached them. Boots. Heavier. Measured. A man in a clean coat stepped into the clearing, carrying rolled papers and tools. He looked at Jonah, then at the land. "This property," he said calmly, "has been claimed." Eliza felt fire rise in her chest. She had survived too much to lose this now. The man did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. That made him more dangerous. He stood at the edge of the clearing with a calm that felt sharpened, like a blade polished smooth. His coat was clean. His boots were new. The papers in his hand were rolled tight, as if the land itself had already been folded into obedience. "I'm not here to argue," he said, "just to inform." Jonah Caldwell said nothing. He only watched. Eliza felt the air change. The woods, usually alive with sound, had gone still. Even the fire seemed to burn quieter. "This hollow," the man continued, "is now listed as Parcel 89, purchased legally, surveyed properly. Settlement will begin by spring." Jonah finally spoke. "I've lived here 20 years. The man nodded once. "That's noted. Not respected, not protected, just noted." Eliza stepped forward before she realized she was moving. "You can't just take it," she said. The man looked at her for the first time, really looked. His eyes flicked over her worn dress, her thin frame, the way she held herself like someone bracing for impact. "I can," he said gently. "And I will." Quote, he tipped his hat to Jonah, to her, then turned and walked away, boots crunching against gravel with deliberate finality. The sound stayed long after he disappeared. That night, Jonah sat by the fire without touching his food. His shoulders seemed smaller, his breathing heavier. Eliza watched him from across the cabin, the weight of the day pressing on her chest. This place had saved her. This man had saved her. The thought of losing it made something twist painfully inside her. "They've done this before," Jonah said at last. "Men like me don't win against paper." Eliza shook her head. "You don't know that." Jonah gave a tired smile. "I do." Silence filled the space between them. Eliza thought of the cabin she'd fled, the fists, the fear, the night she'd chosen life. She had not survived all that just to watch someone else surrender. "There's a town," she said slowly, "down the ridge, Greenville." Jonah looked up. "They file claims there," she continued, "talk to people, make decisions." He studied her, concern creeping into his eyes. "That world isn't kind." Quote, "I know," she said. He shook his head. "You don't owe me this." Eliza's voice was steady. "I owe myself." Jonah saw it then. The fire. The same resolve that had carried her out of the snow. He nodded. Once. She left before dawn. The blanket with the green stars was wrapped around her shoulders. Inside it, the small, carved bird rested against her chest, solid and real. The path down the mountain felt longer than she remembered. Every sound made her flinch. Every shadow stirred old instincts. By the time she reached Greenville, the noise hit her like a wave. Wagons rattled. Men shouted. Hammers rang against wood. The air smelled of smoke, sweat, and ambition. Eliza kept her eyes forward, her steps slow, measured. The land office stood near the center of town. New. Proud. A sign above the door read, "Whitmore Settlement Company." Her heart pounded as she stepped inside. The room was quiet. Orderly. A man sat behind a large desk, gray-bearded and well-dressed. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Yes?" he asked. Eliza swallowed. "I need to speak to you." Quote. He gestured to a chair. "I'm Samuel Whitmore." She sat, her hands trembled, but she did not hide them. She did not argue. She did not beg. She told a story. She spoke of a hidden hollow, of a man who lived in balance with the land, of kindness offered without demand, of a life saved. Her voice wavered once, then steadied. When she finished, the room was silent. Samuel Whitmore leaned back, fingers steepled. "You have no deed," he said gently, "no legal claim." "I know," Eliza said. She reached into the blanket and placed the small blue bird on his desk. "He carved this," she said, "for my mother, before I was born." Whitmore stared at it, then at her. Something shifted in his expression. He rolled up the map beside him. "Parcel 89, he said slowly, "will remain untouched." Eliza's breath left her in a rush, but he wasn't finished. "You understand," he continued, "that this kind of peace doesn't happen by accident. It takes someone who knows both worlds." He studied her. "I could use someone like you." The offer hung between them. Eliza thought of Jonah, of the hollow, of the firelight. "I need time," she said. Whitmore nodded. "Take it." She returned to the mountain at dusk. Jonah stood waiting. She told him everything. He listened, eyes bright with pride and worry all at once. "They want you there," he said. "Yes." He looked toward the trees, the sky darkening above the ridge. "You don't have to choose tonight," he said. Eliza looked at the cabin, the fire, the place that had healed her. Then she looked down the path. "I already am," she whispered. The mountains watched in silence as her future began to pull her in two directions. Eliza stayed awake long after the fire burned low. Jonah slept in his chair, head bowed, hands resting on his knees. The lines in his face looked deeper in the fire's last glow. Time had taken more from him than she realized. She understood then that every choice had a cost, and someone always paid it. At dawn, she packed quietly. Jonah watched from the doorway, saying nothing. When she finished, she turned to him, the blanket folded over her arm, the carved bird tucked safely inside. "I'll come back," she said. He nodded. "I know." That was all. She walked away before fear could change her mind. Greenville felt different the second time. Not louder, not kinder, just clearer. Eliza noticed things she had missed before. The tired faces behind the noise, the tension beneath the order. Progress carried weight, and not everyone bore it evenly. Samuel Whitmore kept his word. He gave her a small room near the edge of town and worked tending the sick. At first, people watched her with caution. A mountain girl. Quiet. Scarred. But pain spoke a shared language. She cleaned wounds, brewed teas, sat through long nights beside fevered children and grieving wives. She listened more than she spoke. And slowly, trust formed. Still, she returned to the mountain whenever she could. Jonah never asked her to stay, never asked her to leave. Their time together was simple. Shared meals, quiet work, long stretches of silence that felt full instead of empty. But change crept closer with every passing week. Roads expanded. Trees fell. Survey stakes appeared nearer the hollow. One afternoon, Eliza found Jonah sitting by the creek, staring at the water. "They won't stop," he said calmly, even with Whitmore trying. Eliza sat beside him. "I won't let them take this." Jonah smiled sadly. Some things can't be held forever. She felt anger rise, sharp, protective. "I didn't survive to watch you fade," she said. Jonah turned to her, eyes gentle. "You survived so you wouldn't have to." The words struck deeper than any blow. The illness came quietly. Jonah grew weaker. His steps slowed. His hands trembled more often. He brushed off her concern, but Eliza noticed everything. One night, she found him collapsed near the fire. She worked through the darkness. Herbs. Compresses. Quiet prayers she didn't know she still believed in. By morning he woke, breathing shallow but steady. He reached for her hand. "Listen to me," he said. She shook her head. "Rest." He smiled faintly. "You always were stubborn." They talked that day. Really talked. About his wife. About the years alone. About the night he found Eliza in the snow and felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Purpose. "You were never meant to hide here forever," he told her. "This place saved you. Now you save others." Tears slid down her face. "I don't want to leave you." "You won't," he said softly. "Not the way you fear." Spring arrived early that year. The hollow bloomed with green. Birds returned. Life pressed forward. So did the settlement. Samuel Whitmore came himself, standing at the edge of the clearing with his hat in hand. "We can protect this land," he said, "but we can't stop time." Jonah listened in silence. Eliza felt the weight of two worlds settle on her shoulders. That night, Jonah asked her to bring him the small medicine bundle. He pressed it into her hands. "This was always meant for you." She tried to protest. He stopped her with a look. "You've become the bridge my wife believed in," he said. "Don't waste it." The fire crackled. The mountain stood watch. Jonah passed in his sleep before dawn. Eliza held his hand until it grew cold. The funeral was small. Quiet. Mountain folk and settlers stood side by side, unsure of one another, united only by respect. Eliza spoke last. She did not speak of loss. She spoke of kindness. Of a man who chose compassion when the world had given him every reason not to. When it was over, she walked alone into the trees. Grief came in waves, heavy, unforgiving, but beneath it, something else remained. Strength. Months later, Eliza moved fully into Greenville. Her cabin stood between town and wilderness. A deliberate choice. A reminder. She worked tirelessly, mediated disputes, healed bodies, softened hearts hardened by fear and change. People began calling her the bridge woman. She never corrected them. On quiet evenings, she returned to the hollow, sat by the creek, spoke to the trees. Jonah was gone, but his presence remained. And Eliza knew, with a calm certainty, that her destiny had never been about escape. It had always been about becoming. Time did not soften Eliza's grief. It reshaped it. The hollow no longer felt empty, but it no longer felt whole either. Every stone held memory. Every tree carried Jonah's quiet lessons. When she walked there alone, her steps slowed, as if the land itself asked her to remember. She never refused that request. In Greenville, her days filled quickly. People came before sunrise and long after dark. Injuries from axes and wagons. Fevers that crept in with the damp spring nights. Arguments over land, water, fences, words spoken too sharply. Eliza listened. That was still her greatest skill. She learned how anger often hid fear, how cruelty often masked pain, how most people, when truly heard, softened without realizing it. Samuel Whitmore watched her work from a careful distance. "You do what laws can't," he said one evening. She met his gaze. "Laws don't bleed." He nodded slowly. Not everyone welcomed her presence. Some men whispered that she sided too much with mountain folk. Others claimed she stood too close to progress. Eliza heard it all and answered none of it. She had learned long ago that survival did not require approval. One afternoon, trouble arrived on horseback. A group of settlers rode in from the eastern ridge, angry and loud. A creek had been dammed upstream by a mountain family, cutting water to their crops. Samuel called a meeting. Voices rose. Accusations flew. Eliza stood quietly until the noise wore itself thin. Then she spoke. She asked questions. Simple ones. Where the water flowed, why the dam had been built, what the families feared losing. When she finished listening, the anger had nowhere left to stand. They walked the land together, adjusted the dam, shared the water. No one cheered. But no one fought either. That was enough. Late one night, Eliza dreamed of snow. She woke with her heart racing, the echo of fists in her ears. For a moment, she was 17 again, small, trapped. Then she reached out. The carved bluebird rested on the table beside her bed. Solid. Real. She breathed. Healing was not a straight path. Jonah had told her that once. She finally understood. Years passed. Greenville grew, but it grew differently than other towns. Slower. More careful. Fences were lower. Paths curved around old trees instead of cutting through them. Some called it inefficient. Others called it home. Eliza aged quietly into her strength. Her hair darkened, then softened with silver. Her voice deepened. Her presence steadied. Children who once cried at her touch now brought their own children to her door. She never married. Love, she had learned, did not require a single shape. One autumn evening, Samuel Whitmore walked with her along the ridge overlooking the valley. "You changed this place," he said. Eliza shook her head. "It changed because people chose differently." He smiled. "You gave them the chance." They stopped where the land dipped into shadow. "What happens when you're gone?" he asked gently. Eliza looked toward the mountains. Toward the hollow hidden beyond the trees. "Then someone else will listen," she said. As winter approached, Eliza returned to the hollow more often. Her steps were slower now. Her breath shorter. She felt the years in her bones. One night, as snow began to fall, she sat by the creek and spoke aloud. "I'm still here," she said. The wind answered softly through the pines. She did not fear the silence anymore. She understood it. In Greenville, a young girl waited by Eliza's door. Bruises marked her arms. Fear lived in her eyes. Eliza knelt, meeting her gaze. "You're safe," she said. The words carried weight now. The circle, Eliza realized, had never been about her alone. It had always been waiting to continue. The girl's name was Lillian. She stood in Eliza's doorway with her hands clenched tight, as if holding herself together by force alone. One sleeve hung lower than the other, hiding something she wasn't ready to show. Her eyes moved constantly, measuring the room, searching for exits. Eliza saw herself. Not the woman she had become, the girl she had been. "Come in," Eliza said gently. Lillian hesitated, then stepped inside. The cabin smelled of herbs and wood smoke. The fire burned low but steady. Eliza poured tea and waited. She did not rush the silence. Finally, Lillian spoke. He said I wouldn't last without him. Eliza nodded. Mine said that too. The girl's breath caught. Sometimes healing began with a single shared truth. Over the following days, Lillian stayed. Eliza tended her bruises the same way Jonah once had. With care, with distance, with respect. She explained every touch before making it. She gave choices whenever she could. Slowly, the girl's shoulders lowered. Her breathing eased. One evening, Lillian asked, "Why do you help people like me?" Eliza looked at the fire, at the way the flames moved without force. Because someone helped me, she said. When I had nothing to give back. Lillian considered that. Then she slept through the night. Winter settled over the valley that year with unusual quiet. Snow softened the land, covered old scars, made everything look new again. Eliza felt her strength wane with the cold, but her spirit remained steady. Samuel Whitmore visited often, bringing news and listening more than he spoke. "You've built something rare," he said one afternoon. "A place where people stop running." Eliza smiled faintly. "People still run. They just know where to land." He studied her, concern flickering in his eyes. "You should rest more." "I will," she said, later. One night, Eliza dreamed of Jonah. He stood by the creek, younger somehow, strong, smiling. "You did good," he said. She woke with tears on her face and peace in her chest. The next morning, she asked Lillian to walk with her. They climbed the familiar path toward the hollow. The girl struggled at first, unused to the incline, but Eliza matched her pace. No rushing, no pushing. When they reached the clearing, Lillian stopped in awe. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Eliza nodded. "It saved me." They sat by the creek, the same water, the same stones. Eliza took out the carved bluebird and placed it in Lillian's hands. "This was given to me before I knew what it meant," she said. "It reminded me that I mattered." Lillian held it carefully, reverently. "I want you to have it," Eliza continued. "Not forever. Just until you don't need it anymore." The girl's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. Spring came again. Eliza grew weaker, though she hid it well. The town noticed. So did Lillian, who had grown stronger in ways that mattered. One morning, Eliza didn't rise from her bed. Lillian ran for help, fear clawing at her chest. Samuel arrived with others, but Eliza was calm, clear-eyed. She took Lillian's hand. "You're going to be all right," she said. The girl shook her head. "Don't leave." Eliza smiled softly. "I'm not." Her breath slowed, her grip loosened. Outside, birds sang. They buried Eliza on the ridge between town and wilderness. Mountain folk stood beside settlers, children beside elders. Silence bound them together. Samuel spoke of peace, of bridges built without stone. Lillian spoke last. "She taught me how to breathe again," the girl said, voice steady. "She taught me that survival is not the same as living." Tears fell, but so did understanding. Years later, a woman stood at Eliza's old doorway. Her posture was calm, her eyes kind. The carved bluebird rested on the table behind her. A frightened child waited on the step. "You're safe," the woman said, and the circle continued. Eliza Reed's name was never carved into stone, but it lived on in choices made quietly, in kindness given without demand, in the courage to listen when the world shouted. Her destiny was never escape. It was becoming the place others could finally stop running. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Archives of the Wild West, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.